Hi there. We're going to start making something else in ceramics. It's called a hanging tile. And when you make a tile, you can either let it just lay on a surface, you can lean it up somewhere, or you can hang it on the wall. And we're going to make sure that our tile you're able to hang it up on the wall. But we'll get into that in a minute. First, you have to design it. Artists always plan their artwork, or almost always, but we're going to have you plan your artwork. And there are some certain things that you'll have to do as requirements to help make this more successful. First of all, the size is going to have to be 5.5 by 5.5 inches, and I'll be able to show you how to get that real easily. The thickness should be about the thickness of a pencil. Maybe just a little bit thicker than that, but not twice a pencil. Little bit like that. The shape should be relatively square. That means ish, means kind of square. Fairly square. So the composition means how you arrange your elements. And this is where it gets to be a little bit, you have to pay attention to the details here. We're going to use a compositional rule called the rule of thirds. Okay, and I'm going to explain a little bit more on the back on the next page. So you'll see what a rule of thirds really is. So when you have a rule of thirds, you're going to have one prominent element attached to one of the intersecting lines. And a rule of thirds kind of looks like that. But we'll get there. So that means where two lines intersect, you'll have to have something happen there. You will also have to have an element along one of the rule of thirds lines. So that means one of these long lines that go across. We'll get there again. You will have to have some adductive sculpting. You'll have to score and attach some pieces. You'll have to at least attach one large item, two medium-sized items, and 3 small attachments. That's the minimum requirement. You can do more than that. You will also have to have some deductive sculpting, and that's when you take clay away with a tool, and you need to have an obvious relief sculpting area. All right, you've done relief sculpting on the dome of your dome sculpture, and you need to have some obvious texturing happen. Nothing too soft and subtle that you can't hardly see. And we'll get into that with the design. Other things you need, you will have to have at least 2 overlaps. Okay. By the way, this is going to be on a slides sheet for you to review. You don't have to memorize it right now. As far as coverage, you have to have at least 3 edges touched. I mean, part of your design needs to go off the edge of the tile. All right, at least 3 of those edges, and then a maximum of 25% blank or smooth space, an area that's not addressed at all. All right, so those are the basic requirements, and we'll go over how this works. So in your design, remember, one part has to go here, or here, or here, or here. That's a prominent thing as well. Along these lines, you'll have to have something kind of, and it doesn't have to go right over the top of it. That's not the point. This kind of has to happen over here. And what happens with the rule of thirds, it's kind of commonly known that if you have an image and some of the elements on the image kind of go along the rule of thirds, it becomes a more pleasing image to look at. So you can see how this surfer is right on that line right there. The horizon in the background is right along that line right there. And this is kind of simplified. Ones that we make might be a little more complex, but that's the idea behind rule of thirds. So we're going to have you guys do that. Now, when you do your themes, we have lots of different possibilities. I just quickly made a quick list of these. It could be something more abstract, and I'll show you a sample of that. But it can be nature, sports, music, holiday, whatever it wants to be, but you do need to always have it be school appropriate. So et cetera, it means this list could be much longer if you chose it to be. We will be doing a drawing, and you'll be handing that in, taking a photo or handing it in. And the drawing will need to be life-size. I'll help you with that. And you start with the scheme to help you compose your design. Okay, this means you will kind of plan it out first before you really kind of start to build it. Okay, so with this just kind of explains the rule of thirds. You'll see that in the slideshow as well. All right, let me show you a few samples of what some of these tiles could be. Now, these samples do not follow all the rules that we just talked about. And again, you will see these in the slideshow. You can see here's some blank space. That's too much blank space for what we will do. And this doesn't necessarily, see this right here, that stem, that kind of goes along that rule of thirds, right? Excuse me. If you were to block that off into rule of thirds, you could say that that leaf kind of hits two of those marks. But this is not the point of these. These are just to give you some ideas of how parts might overlap each other and how you might do some relief sculpting. These do not necessarily follow the rule of thirds. Okay, here is one that's more abstract. Okay, and again, I don't see a sense of overlaps in this, but again, these are just some ideas to generate so you can use them as kind of inspiration. Again, there isn't really a rule of thirds thing here. Maybe the eyes are on the rule of thirds, or right in there somewhere. But again, these are just to help inspire ideas for you. Let me see, what else do we have? These are pretty fancy. These are not square, so that does not follow our idea. But there's nice overlaps. You'll have some parts that kind of stick out farther. These fish might even have little pieces of clay underneath to help them stick out farther. All right, so these are just as inspiration, that's all. Now, let's get into the real meat and potatoes of what you have to do to measure out, and this is just computer paper, to measure out 5.5 inches. All you have to do is take another piece of computer paper, fold it in half because it's 11 inches, fold it in half, and there's your 5.5 inches right there. So all you need to do, and I'll do this fairly quickly, is line it up in the corner and just kind of draw a line right there, and line it up in this corner, and draw another line along the other side, and there you have your 5.5 inch square. You also have one right down here if you want to try again. Okay, 1, 2. One thing that I almost always have students do if they're not quite sure what to do is to make a thumbnail sketch. And a thumbnail sketch is one that's about, that size. Okay, and it's a really good idea just to help plan where your artwork is, how your artwork is going to be composed. And to be composed means, again, how you're going to arrange things. So I'm going to design a tile that has like leaves and ladybugs and branches and maybe some moss on the ground, to think of it as the forest floor. Okay, that's my idea. And you want to have resources to work from as well. That is usually part of the assignment. Ask your teacher if they're going to require resources. I know I always do in my class. So first things first, let's put in our rule of thirds. And when you do this, you don't have to be absolutely perfect, but you can get pretty close at making kind of this tic-tac-toe, this checkerboard. So each one of these boxes are pretty darn equal to each other. All right, so now let's go back to our requirements. The shape is square. The composition, we're going to have something, and I'm going to make a leaf since I'm going to have some leaves. I'm going to draw a leaf, one of my bigger ones, and make it go right about through that cross. Okay, if I want to, I can erase that a little bit, but it doesn't matter right now. I'm just demonstrating. And then I can fulfill one of my other requirements is 2 overlaps. I could make another leaf, just kind of stick out right over here. And again, I'm going to have one large one. I could call that a medium-sized one, and I could put somewhere over here as well. The next thing you want to do, or at some point, what you'll need to do, is have something going along one of these pathways. Okay, I'm going to have a branch, maybe a broken branch right there, and maybe it kind of splits over here. I can let that branch kind of split here, come back over here, and maybe have another little branch off right there. And I could, adjust that if I wanted to. But see how I made it basically go pretty much right along that line of the rule of thirds. If you do this intentionally, after you're done, it's going to look like things just naturally fell into the right place. All right, I could do a ladybug right here. Now, I'm going to go to this thumbnail. And your thumbnail is like this. I'm going to say there's a leaf. There, I'm going to put another leaf right there. I'm going to put a branch right there, maybe do another branch here. This is how fast your thumbnails go. It just helps you organize things. Okay, and if you don't like that one, you can do another one right over here and put the leaves over in the, just kind of rearrange the elements. All right, so there we go. We have one overlap. I'm going to put another, maybe a small leaf, because remember we have to do a large, medium, and small. And my large, medium, and small do not all have to be leaves. One of my ladybugs could be one of my 3 small things that are on my list of requirements. But another thing with artwork is it's a good idea to repeat something. So I'm going to repeat the idea of a branch. I'm not going to worry about where it lies, even though I just happen to make it go right on that rule of thirds line. And let's see, let's do another little branch right there. Don't get awfully, overly detailed, guys. You will have a handful of elements going on. Maybe I'll make a branch go out here and just stop it right there. And again, this is all something that we can alter and change. What else? I'm not going to do much else because I have one that's kind of finished. But you will have to plan out where you're going to do a couple of other things. You're going to have to plan out where the deductive carving is, and on mine, it's going to be mostly where that moss is. And I'm going to cheat because I did a little bit of work already, and I kind of finished my design. I did it in ink in a Sharpie just so you could see it really well. I colored part of it. You don't have to color yours because we're not expected that you have colored pencils. Unless you're in class. If you're in class doing this, then we'll have colored pencils for you. So that's why only half of it is colored. I want you to see what it looks like uncolored as well. So when I start doing moss, that's where I'm going to do some relief sculpting. I'm going to draw a line right there with a tool and do some carving away. I might do some other relief sculpting maybe between these leaves or something. My texture, there's going to be obvious texture in the moss and in the ground. I'm going to do some texture to make it look like the forest floor, and I'm going to do some texture in the wood grain of these branches. All right, so there's going to be different areas for texture. We also want to design in where the holes are going to be, and typically on the top 2 corners, so we can like tie a string there and hang it, okay? And don't put these holes way out here by the corners because it's gonna break the clay. They need to come in at least the thickness of a pencil. That's even a little bit more than the thickness of a pencil. Maybe a little bit more than that, it would be safe. Just don't put the holes, the black holes, way in here. They need to kind of go in the corner, but they don't have to. You don't want to put them way in the corner over here. Here's a couple of thumbnails that I did. I did them in ink so you could see them well. I have the red lines here for my rule of thirds. These are the exact same elements. There's my twig going across right along that rule of thirds. Over here, I decided to change it to that direction. That's all good. Here's my leaf that's going right through that intersection. Here, I put it down here through that intersection. So they both have a similar feel because I followed the same rules. Now, this is what you're going to have to hand in along with your resources. Okay? So you do have to plan things out. In the next video, we'll start to show you how to make the slab and do some initial attachments. All right, there you go. Ask your teacher for more help, and they'll give you more details and let them know exactly what you need if it's a little bit different than this. All right, have fun with that.